Well, it's great to have Lee Reeves here. Lee and I actually just met last week. We were introduced by Phil Schneider of Schneider Speech, and we just hit it off. And it was just so much fun. I thought we should get together and do a video. I think you're going to find this really inspirational because unlike me, when he was younger and facing stuttering, he didn't curl up in a ball like I did. He actually went after it and didn't let it hold him back. So let me introduce Lee Reeves here. So Lee is an early pioneer of the NSA, the National Stuttering Association. In fact, he's the former chairman of the board. As a person who lives with stuttering, he hasn't let that hold him back. A veterinarian by profession, he still works part-time and keeps busy as a public member for the speech pathology for ASHA's Council for Clinical Competence and a leader in To Be Like Me, a nonprofit organization dedicated to bringing awareness about disabilities and differences to school-age children, including stuttering. You're really going to like this conversation. Let me introduce Lee Reeves. Lee, it's great to have you here.
Thanks, Larry. It's great to be here. Thanks for asking me.
So from our previous conversation, which was so much fun for me, you mentioned that your back was against the wall. And, I said my back was against the wall too. And your back was against the wall to improve your speech. Why was that? And how did you make such an improvement?
Well, I had a pretty significant stuttering issue, like many of us who stutter from the time that I began talking, right up on through college or into college. And at that point in time, I was at a low point with my speech. I had just been accepted to veterinary school, which was a feat in and of itself for a kid who could hardly say his name. But it was at that point in time that I knew that I had to do something about my speech. And I think the turning point, Larry, is with so many of us, is timing. Timing is everything. I've had speech therapy my whole life, through elementary, junior high, high school. It never really had much of an effect on me. Although I learned something, I think, from every speech therapist, and I had a bunch of them that I ever had, but it didn't really help my stuttering much. I think what was a turning point is that when my back was against the wall, I had to take responsibility for my speech and what I was going to do about it. It wasn't my parents, it wasn't the school, it wasn't the therapist who was in charge. I was going to have to do something. So I think that was the key.
Interesting. And yet you became a veterinarian.
Yeah.
And so how did that work with you having the stuttering with being a veterinarian?
Well, it actually worked pretty well. Yeah. As I said, when I got into veterinary school, I was still quite severe in my stuttering, and so fortunately, I was able to find a therapist, someone who was able to walk me, help me in the therapy to not only change the way that I stuttered, not that I spoke, because I still stutter, and I stuttered then, but to help improve and change the way that I stuttered, and more importantly, I think to help change my attitudes and my fear about stuttering and fear of what other people thought about me. So as my stuttering improved through that therapy, I was, by the time I graduated from veterinary school 3 years later, my stuttering was a relatively minor part of my communication. And I felt great. I mean, I was on top of the world. Even though I was still stuttering, I had been taught and learned some management strategies to not struggle so much with my stuttering, and it made speaking a lot easier. But then I had a relapse. About 6 months out of veterinary school, my stuttering began to come back with a vengeance. And that's not uncommon. But in those days, nobody really knew the term relapse. Nobody talked about it. Speech pathologists didn't understand relapse, and neither did I or anybody else. So that led me to start a self-help group in Dallas in 1982, and that was really very helpful for me, because once I got around other people who stuttered and was able to not only reach out and help them, they were helping me just by my grounding myself again. I think what happened is I forgot I was a stutterer. I began trying to live a life as a person who didn't stutter, and once that mindset came in, my stuttering came back. You can't fool your brain for very long.
No, the brain has a way of doing that. So give me a little more on how you got out of this relapse and back to what seems to be a very good communicator.
Well, I'm a pretty good stutterer, and what got me out of it was that I had learned the strategies. I had learned about my own stuttering. I had learned how to manage my stuttering. I was pretty much an expert, not only on the phenomena of stuttering, on the disorder of stuttering, but I was an expert on my own stuttering. And so when I began having problems, I tried to find another therapist to help me. And the problem was, I talked to 2 or 3 or 4 in the Dallas area, and nobody really knew what to do with me. Because when I walked into their therapy rooms for an interview to talk to them, and I was a veterinarian by then. I was already owned my practice, and I didn't stutter. Because I've been in speech therapy rooms my entire life. There was no place that was more comfortable than in a speech therapist room. And I was talking about stuttering, which I knew a lot about, so it was okay to talk about. So I drove them nuts, because I would tell them how much trouble I was having, and they just sat there in awe, because I was talking like this and not doing any stuttering.
Yeah.
Because outside of the room, my stuttering would be more like this. And so, not, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
So the straw that broke the camel's back is I went into one therapist, and she said, well, she had this real puzzled look on her face after we chatted. And she said, well, Lee, exactly when is it that you stutter? And I said, the minute I walk out that door. And she said, well, when you begin to stutter more, why don't you come back and maybe we can help you? And that was the straw. I was so angry. I was so frustrated and so fearful. I didn't know what to do. And then a series of events happened. I met another speech pathologist who was a researcher down here. We got to talking, not as a therapist, but just as somebody that was involved in stuttering research. I told her about some experiences that I had had in high school in self-help. And she said, that's what we need here. We need a self-help group. So she helped me to start that group in Dallas. And that seemed to be all I really needed.
Really? How did the self-help group help you? I would love to understand this. And I'm sure many other people would too.
Well, there's a technology about self-help that, when you begin to study it, it's quite effective. It works something like it. First of all, you're with other folks that are dealing with the same issue. It doesn't matter what it is. In our case, it happens to be stuttering.
Yeah.
And for many people, that's the first time they've ever met or been around another adult in their life who stuttered. Right. They thought they were alone. So just being and meeting other people who stuttered is kind of lets some of the pressure off. You realize for the first time that you're not the only one. People begin sharing their stories, and you can relate to them in your own life, and the stories you tell, they understand. And so that sharing of stories begins to help reduce some of the shame and some of the guilt that you feel. Then, if you keep going to the meetings, what you find is that someone who is, for example, is let's just say more fluent. I don't like that term, but let's just say someone who doesn't stutter as severely as you do says, I felt really good because I ordered for myself in the restaurant, last week.
Yeah.
He came over and he tried to fill in a word, and I said no, and I made him wait till I actually ordered. Well, we all can relate to being in a restaurant and saying, well, I'll have that.
Yeah.
Right? You point to it. Oh, yeah,
Right.
I'll have what he had, or she had.
Right.
We've all done that avoidance a million times in our life.
Million.
And so the person who is just coming in hears that and says, I could never do that. I could never stop a waiter. And if I'm in a group of people and say, no, I want to say it, or I want to do it, I could never do that. Well, the longer you're in that group and you get this cohesive folks and you're hearing stories, both successes and some failures,
Mm-hmm.
you begin to build some confidence in your ability, even going around the circle and just saying your name every single month.
Yeah.
After all, it gets easier. The first time, it's a killer,
Right.
and the next time easier. And so there's this gradual transition of you finally get up enough courage that, by golly, I'm going to go into the restaurant, or maybe you go as a group and somebody says, no, I'm going to say it myself. I'm going to order myself. And that may be the very first time in their life they've ever done that.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
So
Go ahead.
it's that kind of technology. And as they do it, a new person comes in and they share, so you just sort of build.
That's nice. So how did you summon the courage to become a veterinarian, to be out there with people? I mean, I can tell you that at that age, I compromised my career. I didn't do what I wanted to do. I just went into something that I wouldn't have to be in front of people. But you did it.
Well, I'm one of the.
What's your secret sauce?
Yeah, I think I'm a very fortunate and unusual. There are very few people that know at an early age exactly what it is they want to do.
I actually knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't think I could do it. So, but you did.
Yeah, I knew exactly what I wanted to be when I was 5 years old. And my father was a veterinarian, and but he was in the military. He didn't do clinical practice. He was a scientist. And I knew that's what I wanted to do. And so all of my jobs when I was 13, I went to work in an animal hospital, cleaning cages and sweeping floors. And even though I had a really tough time communicating, I just never gave up on that dream.
Could you talk to the animals?
Yeah, you can. And you could, people talk about singing and talking to children and talking else, but the reality is, science behind that is that we don't talk to animals or children the same way we talk to each other. The volume is different, the prosody is different, we talk in different tones, we talk in different rhythms. It's all different, so it's not quite the same. But yeah, no, I talk to animals.
I always found it helpful, yeah. So given your journey, you've done so much, you've been the chairman of the NSA and all that. What advice would you want to give to people who are trying to work through their stuttering?
Well,
have any pearls of wisdom?
Yeah, it's not easy. Stuttering is difficult. It's a condition that oftentimes we're told at a very early age that we'll outgrow it, but we don't. At a very early age, people, even speech therapists, don't know much about stuttering still, even to this day.
Yeah.
So there's not good therapy. Then you've got your family and the relatives who each have their own ideas about stuttering and what causes it, and they give you, unhelpful, helpful advice. Stop, slow down, start over, think about what you're going to say, take it.
That always feels good, right?
Yeah, all the things that they think are help, but don't help. And so we get this baggage placed on top of us. So what I try to tell people is, look, I think one of the most important things to do is to become an expert in stuttering. Learn as much as you can about the condition. Stuttering's been around since Homo sapiens began standing up on 2 feet. Aristotle in 365 BC described it as an apoplexy, that is a seizing of the inside, something seizes up. And he talked about it being that the mind is going faster than the voice can keep up with. This is in 365 BC.
Yeah.
He also talked about there being kind of a melancholy aspect, that is an emotional aspect. So those two things have never changed. Something seizes up, and there's a response or reaction emotionally to that. It was true in 365 BC, and it's true today.
Yeah.
So learning that stuttering is not your fault, and it's nobody's fault. There's some inheritance involved in many cases, genetics, but not always. Learning a little bit about how the voice works. So I think learning about stuttering, and then learning about your own stuttering, analyze your own, where's the tension, where, and then situations. Join a self-help or a support group. Being around other people who stutter and have had experiences similar to yours can be incredibly helpful, just incredibly helpful.
Mm.
And then if individuals want to pursue further than that and get some speech therapy, then you need to seek out a therapist who has a lot of experience in stuttering. Find out their credentials. And then also you want to talk a little bit about what their philosophy is, because there are a lot of different approaches to treat stuttering. So you just have to be, I think, an educated consumer. But I think the most important thing is to get with other people who stutter.
Was there a particular approach that helped you, Lee, through your stuttering?
Well, yes, but what helped me might not help you or the next individual. I
Right.
had what could be described as stuttering modification therapy. Essentially what that was is not trying to teach me not to stutter, because that's not very helpful in the end point, because we're going to stutter. It's going to happen at some point.
Yeah.
But learning some strategies of how to manage a block once I was in it, how to release that kind of tension, how to
Right.
anticipate and sort of prepare for speaking, easy onsets, those kinds of things. Voluntary stuttering was very helpful once I learned some strategies. That is, this sounds so counterproductive, but
Doesn't it?
stuttering on purpose is very, very effective, because it puts us in control of the stutter rather than the stutter in control of us.
That's so important, isn't it?
It is. And then, of course, being able to talk to other people about your stuttering. I've always told people that the skills and strategies involved with the neuromotor, with being able to change or manage the actual event, the actual moment of stuttering, is not that hard. But the emotional aspect of it, actually doing the work and getting out and talking about it, is 90% of the work.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I just, even after I, learned some techniques and changed my speech, I realized, wow, 50 years of stuttering really had an impact on me, or as I say, messed me up. And so, how did you get through that? How did you work through all that emotional stuff?
Yeah, but it's there. I don't think there's a simple answer, Larry.
No, there isn't.
I think it takes work. It takes effort. I think very few people do this alone. I mean, I know of very few people who actually did it, whatever it is, alone. Um, I think we need help in terms of being able to identify ourselves. Sometimes it's counseling, but a good speech language pathologist is also a good counselor. But a good counselor is not always a good speech language pathologist.
Right.
And so there are those two components to it. It just takes trial and error. I think it takes resilience. We have to be able to pick ourselves up off the floor and keep on going. Try not to let stuttering beat us down too much, because it can. I mean, it can be very debilitating, and that's unfortunate, because it doesn't necessarily have to be. Even individuals, like I told you a story of a good friend of mine who stutters up a storm. I mean, he is a really good stutterer. He couldn't, I don't think from just a physiological standpoint, from a brain standpoint, I don't think he couldn't stutter to save his life. It's just, that's his makeup. But he won multiple competitions in Toastmasters International.
Really?
Yeah, he was an international speaker for Toastmasters.
Even though he stuttered, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And
Yes.
he put up a storm during all of the speeches and the things that he did. But his attitude about stuttering and his attitude about communication was incredible. He would say, I stutter, you probably hear that, I talk a little differently. That's because I'm from Texas, or something like that. And he would be stuttering the whole time. So attitude and being able to accept, acceptance is so big. Some people view acceptance as kind of throwing in the towel, kind of giving up and saying, well, I accept myself as a stutterer. It's who I am. It's who I'm going to be. There's not much that can be done about it. So that's on the low end of it, acceptance, and that's unfortunate. I think that's unfortunate. And then there are those on the other end of the spectrum who say, I stutter, and by God, you better, accept me for who I am. And they wear their stuttering on their arm almost like a badge of honor in your face. Yeah. And those folks can get a little angry and kind of belligerent that they've accepted themselves as people stutter. And then I think there's the in between that says, look, I stutter, and it's part of who I am. Now I'm not going to let it define who I am, but and there was a real stutter right there. But I stutter, and I accept that, but I don't have to stay where I am. Acceptance doesn't mean that you're done. To me, acceptance is just the beginning.
I think so. Lee, this has been great. I can talk to you all day, but we're going to have to do this again. I have so many more questions for you, but thanks again. And I think this is going to be really helpful to a lot of people. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. And thanks for what you're doing.
It's our mission together, So take care. We'll talk soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.